everyone to keep their videos on so we can make this session more interactive. If you have any questions, we will have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Please raise your hand if you would like to ask something or you want to share something. अगर आपके कुछ भी सवाल हैं तो प्लीज सेशन के एंड तक आप वेट करिए. उसके बाद हम लोग एक Q&A सेशन होल्ड करेंगे. Now I'll tell you what Freecomers actually does. Freecomers is building a creator-led film ecosystem that helps filmmakers, audiences, and industry partners so that they connect more meaningfully. Our goal here is to support emerging voices, streamline discovery, and create a stronger pathway for creative collaboration. Filmy Friday is a new initiative to bring the community together and learn from industry experts. आज का session is being held by Ketki ma'am, who brings deep experience in storytelling and creative development. Ketki ma'am is a writer, filmmaker, and educator. She's an alumnus of the New York University's Tisch School of Arts and Film and TV Institute of India's Screenplay and Writing Department. Ma'am has made 7 short films and has worked on over 40 short film sets in various capacities. She's also taught screenwriting since 2009 and was the HOD and course mentor at FTII Screenwriting Department for several years. She's also been a mentor at NFDC Screenwriters Lab and Marathi Script Lab and has conducted sessions for the Kerala State Film Development Corporation. She's currently writing a Hindi feature film. This session is about helping you find clarity in your own voice. There's so much content out there, but people do not know what to connect and how to find a way so that a story makes them feel something that they themselves connect to. Today, we'll spend some time figuring out what makes your voice stand out and how you can use that to make stronger and more intentional story choices. Ketki ma'am, thank you so much for joining us. The floor is now yours.
Thank you so much, Shubhra. And thanks a lot, Freecomers, for inviting me for this session. I'm really excited about it. And hello, everybody. I hope we'll get to connect on Freecomers more meaningfully, like Shubhra said. But I'm glad that we're meeting like this today. And if you saw the questionnaire, very simple questions, right? So I thought, why not, before we start or get into, you know, the how do I find my place as a storyteller, really situating ourselves in the very basics of why we want to tell stories, how we consume stories, and what are our how does like how do we choose what we want to watch. So I think Shikha, you've shared the answers, the analysis, right?
Yes, ma'am. Should I also share it like on the screen, or this is good in the chat section?
So in the chat section, I see one particular answer. I see that most people want to write web series. You can actually, why not share it? We'll go question by question and.
Okay, ma'am. I'll just share the screen for a meanwhile, and then you can share up. Yes, so is my screen visible?
Yes. Let's make it. So the first question is what kind of content you want to create. And I think even 10 years ago, this question would not have been as relevant as it is today. And some 25, 30 years ago, this question almost didn't exist because we had only 2 kind of options. And now, today, we have infinite options, right? And I see that most of you are leaning towards creating web series. Then we have TV serials, we have, excuse me, we have feature films, we have short films, there is documentaries, there is micro dramas that are coming up, there is of course, the social media with reels. And so I see that the top three are web series, TV series, and reels. We will tap into this as we go forward because the formats of each and the audience of each is different, right? And so before we go ahead, I just wanted to sort of understand where everybody is coming from. Then the next is when you choose to watch, how do you choose, right? And I see that most people choose by actors, which clearly answers why we call our system, like, our industry a star-driven industry. Um, Directors, I'm glad that actors and directors are on the same level. Some people with writers, reviews, recommendations, box office. And what is really interesting is that the subject matter is not really ranking any higher than any of the other factors. And then when we go down, the question is, why do you want to tell stories? And this is where we have like a very clear winner, that I want to express myself. And then some people want to educate people, send out a message. Some people want to make money. And there is like about 8% people who say that I want to entertain. Okay, so we can keep this in mind, right? But I think the most important thing I wanted to get out of this is that as storytellers, all of us really want to create content or tell stories because we want to express ourselves in some way. And then the second one is, of course, I want to educate people, send out a message, or change the world. Essentially, there is something that, which is sort of a slightly more glorified version of I want to express myself, right? Because there is something I feel is important to be said, important that needs to go out in the world. And that is why I'm telling this story. So over 80% of us want to tell stories because of this reason. But only 8% of us actually want to watch a film because of their subject matter or concept. The subject matter or concept is not at the top of even our own viewing list as a creator, as a storyteller. Uh, there are several other factors that matter equally or sometimes more, right? So this is a certain dichotomy that I think we should keep in mind before we go ahead. So I think, Shikha, you can stop sharing and let me share the presentation. Okay, so I've just put together very kind of bare bones, but the very core of what our discussion is, that how to stand out in a crowded marketplace. There is so many options, so many platforms, and so many storytellers, so many people competing for those spots. And what is it that makes us stand out? And I would like to begin with the discussion of what are stories, right? Why stories? Why do we indulge in stories? Why is it a multi-billion-dollar industry? Um, it's not, it's nothing tangible, right? Like uh, we can survive without, it's not our food, shelter, air, right? It's not something that is regarded essential for survival. And yet, it is one of the biggest industries. So clearly there's a market for it. And why is it so? And I feel that we have had stories since even before we had language. Our most primitive type of stories we find are things that were carved inside caves, let's say. It's very interesting, uh, when we lived in jungles, like our ancestors lived in jungles and were probably hunter-gatherers, or um, they did not come inside a cave and draw a beautiful pond with a lotus. They did not come inside and, draw butterflies and a beautiful sunrise. And I'm sure they were also capable of feeling the beauty of those things. But what they came in and draw were these saber-toothed tigers and huge mammoth elephants. They drew pictures of hunts, right? And what are these? These are essentially stories. They're not, our earliest expressions were stories. And why do we need these stories? Because there is a very beautiful YouTube video. It's a TEDx talk by Julian Friedman. He is an agent, a British agent, and he's sort of in this talk given his understanding of stories. And so I'm borrowing from him when I say that he said that these paintings in the cave were probably our earliest films. We were drawing, we were talking about what was scary, what shook us, what made us think. And that's why what was shared were often not depictions of beauty or pleasure, but of depictions of really difficult hunt or difficult, multi-human coordinations, because especially for big hunts, that is what you needed. You needed a lot of people to come together. And that's what stories really do for us. They allow us to sort of look at life from a distance and in some way prepare ourselves for that life. A lot of the times when we are like, I want you to think of the stories that have really, really deeply connected with you. And what has that done for you? We all have different favorites, right? And the different things that we connect to. And so for me, I went to a Marathi medium school, which was a very, very conservative girls' school. And there was a very clear code of what girls should do and girls shouldn't do. And I grew up reading Marathi literature, in which, again, all the girls were so well behaved. They were all such, sweet girls. And even if they were a little mischievous, they never pushed the boundaries. Uh, it was always the boys who got to be naughty, who got to be mischievous. And for me, the first book that connected very deeply with me was Gone with the Wind, which starts with, right, a very headstrong, willful protagonist who doesn't listen to anybody. And on the very first page, she's actually thinking about how can she lie to her father, so that she can get some. And it was so amazing for me to see a certain human portrayal, that you could have all of that and still be a hero of the story. And that was something that totally liberated me, right? And it was very interesting because Gone with the Wind takes place in United States, in the South of United States, right? The enslaving South. The protagonist of this story is the daughter of a slave owner. And it takes place on the background of civil war. And when I read, it was one of the very first English books that I read, and I had to read it with a dictionary. So the language wasn't easy for me, but the character just got to me. And it didn't matter how difficult it was for me to read that book. I read the entire 1,024 pages with the dictionary by my side, right? And that taught me something very important about stories, that the stories let us live, of course, vicariously, in the experiences that we cannot have, or they allow us to escape. But more importantly, I think most importantly, they give us a witness to our existence. Uh, it's very interesting when Tare Zameen Par was released, right? We see this dyslexic boy who feels like such a misfit. And it was so interesting that those of us who are not dyslexics also really connected, and we all knew what does it mean to feel like a misfit, right? And so something very deep inside us, good stories resonate with something very, very deep inside us. And they give us the reason to continue living in some ways, the strength to be ourselves, to, to know that, okay, even though I feel extremely lonely right now, where I am, and I don't think anybody understands me, there is somebody out there, right? And so that is the function of stories. That is why during COVID, while we were all stuck in our houses, of course, we could, we played games, we learned recipes, yeah, but we consumed stories because we needed connection with the world. And so that is our job as storytellers, really, to help people connect and connect with people, right? But when we saw, uh, the answer to the question that why do I want to tell stories is to express myself, to say something that I want to say, and why people want to watch stories is it's very different, right? And so how do we bridge this gap? Um, and so the very first answer to this question, I feel, is know thyself. And what is it that I need to know about myself? Because there's a market for all sorts of stories, right? There are people who love horror, there are thrillers, there are love stories. Um, and then, so there is at least all this fiction content that falls in a genre. And then there is all of this content, even cringe content, right? Where we are simply looking at somebody eating inordinate amounts of food and people are watching. And then there are cat videos. So there is this huge spectrum of content, which is a huge spectrum of possibilities, right? And so we are at a very interesting juncture in storytelling, I feel, that because so much content is being created on a daily basis, like we've never, as a species, as humans, created and consumed so much content on a daily basis. And one of our biggest worries because of that is that, has this been done before? Whenever you go out, people are asking for something new, something fresh. And you wonder, but how do I know if this has never been done before? Because even cinema now, audiovisual medium, has 100-year history already. So anything we think of, there is a great possibility that it has already been done, and probably in a really good way, right? Like you may find that, oh, this is something like, it was very, I wrote something last night, very, very passionately. So when I was a student at FTII, I wrote a screenplay. And whenever I read that screenplay to anybody, people would say, oh, the story is nice. I like the story, but I don't know who wants to watch it. And that really killed me because it was the character was so close to my heart. And, I'd spent so much energy writing that. And 20 years later, I have finally found the courage to turn this story into a novel. And I wrote the first draft of the first chapter yesterday, first page. And I read it out to my mother. And I read just first 3 pages, and my mother was like, wait, this is exactly how Albert Camus' novel starts. My mother died yesterday, or maybe today, I do not know. And I was like, I have not even read Camus, okay? I am not trying to steal. This is something. So, what I wrote was also about a mother leaving and the person not being sure of when she left. And it's very interesting. I have not read Camus, and yet I'm saying the same exact thing, because a lot of these emotions are universal. It's very natural that for my character to not really remember the details of the time and day when the mother left. Just for Camus, that when, like for the character in Camus' novel, for him to not have that awareness of time because the loss is so huge, right? And so this is something Carl Jung calls as our collective unconscious, right? That there are stories that we may tell again and again and again because they're so universal and they're so deep rooted to our existence as human beings, as our experience of life as human beings. And so when you start something you know, invariably a friend will come up, a colleague will come up and say, oh, have you seen that movie? It's just like that. Have you read that book? It's just like that. And the first thing that's going to happen is, right, the whole air goes out of your balloon and you're like, oh, this has already been done. And then the answer is, but not by you, right? And so the whole point of finding your voice is to understand, why am I the best person to tell a particular story? And what are these stories that I'm the best person to be telling? And that connects a lot more again with our worries, with our concern, with our fears, with our traumas, with our obsessions, right? What kind of story? Because writing, whether it's a reel or a feature film, anything that, any piece of art demands a piece of you, a piece of your soul. Even if it's cringe content, I feel that the creator needs to believe that it's fun. And only then you can create it with that kind of conviction. Because otherwise, we end up constantly second guessing ourselves that, oh, it's going to be too much. Is this going to be too emotional? Am I going to alienate people? Right? But we know that while we all want relatable content, we also want new content. Right? And that new is somewhere inside each one of us, because nobody has really lived the life that I have lived. And voice is nothing but really sum total of who I am. When I was teaching at FTII, we had invited Nagraj Manjure for a masterclass. He was there for a day and he spoke with students, and he had just Fandry had released, but Sairat was not out yet. And because Nagraj comes from the Nagraj's own background is very similar to that of Jabya, who is the protagonist of Fandry. Students had this question that, is this film autobiographical? Is this who you are, right? Is this from your life? And what I think the way Nagraj answered it really stayed with me. He said that if I say that my life is a farm, right? And it includes the soil, it includes the crop, and the whole toil that goes into, tilling the land and sowing the seeds and watering the soil. But what the film is the grain that I harvest from that life. So is it my life? Yes. But is it my life? No. And I feel that is a very, that is true of stories, but I think that is also true of one's voice. My voice is not just, that I use these fantastic structures, that I tell my stories non-linearly, that, I use bold colors. Like, for example, there is something in this presentation that is very much my voice, right? I bet you didn't expect to see a cat on the very first page. But that's unexpected and that's fun and that's who I am. But at the same time, when I'm talking, I also, there is something that makes sense to me. And there is a reason why this cat is not on the first page. And the first page cat is not on this page, right? So there is also meaning. And so my voice is really sum total of who I am. How I like to say things, but also what is it that I like to say, right? And that is shaped by who I am as a person. And so one of the things, and this happens very, very often, you'll meet somebody, and when you tell them, especially in the film business, when you tell somebody that, oh, I'm a filmmaker or a writer, the first question they'll ask you is, what kind of stories do you write? And if you say, oh, all kind of stories, they're not going to think you're a very serious writer, because that tells them that you don't really know where your preoccupation lies, right? And I actually found this the answer to this question when I was, I was at Film Bazaar. I was mentor at NFDC's Screenwriters Lab, and I was at Film Bazaar, and this producer from Australia, we got talking, and she was like, "Oh, so what kind of films do you write?" And I was like, um, I had to take a deep breath and was like, human stories. And she was like, but all stories are human stories. What stories do you write? And it was very interesting for me. And I really did this exercise. I went through everything that I've written. And even the poems, like everything, ideas scribbled somewhere. And I realized that my stories are always about love. I'm preoccupied with this idea of love. It could be the love between a mother and daughter. It could be love between two lovers, siblings, friends. But essentially, the question that I'm asking constantly to myself is, what is love? What does love mean? I, put together a list of all the films that I've really liked. And I realized that those are also films that question the sort of neat uh, uh, or savory societal definitions of love. When you watch something like Ryan's Daughter, which is an adaptation of Madame Bovary, but oh, what a feminist adaptation, to be honest. And spoiler alert, I would still highly, highly recommend you go watch this film. It's called Ryan's Daughter by David Lean. David Lean is also the guy who made Lawrence of Arabia and Dr. Zhivago and, Bridge on the River Kwai. So he's just like a fantastic filmmaker. But my favorite film of David Lean is Ryan's Daughter, which you already, from the title, know that it's a story of a father-daughter relationship. The most interesting thing about the film is that we don't really see the father and daughter together for much of the time in the film. A father is living his own life, the daughter is living her own life. But what really I loved about Ryan's Daughter is it's the story of this woman who marries her teacher, who is much older than her, and feels a little disappointed in the marriage, sort of sexually, and then goes and has an affair with a younger man. And there is this priest. The film happens in Ireland, and Ireland is a very Catholic country, right? So the priest is not. He's the one who has sort of brought this couple together, and so when he learns of this, betrayal or adultery by the girl, and a lot follows. Like I'm telling you, really like the very core of the film, or what the film means to me, to be honest. Um, of course, the husband goes through a lot of turmoil, and but the priest, and they finally have to leave the small village that they've been living in. And the very last frame of the film is where this priest says to the husband that, I'm guessing that you're thinking that you will move to a city and separate and go your own ways, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure. And something about the way this husband has stood by his young wife throughout the entire ordeal tells the priest that despite adultery, there is love. There is more to this relationship than what people can see, And so if you make a list of all the films that you like and everything that you've written, you'll realize that this is what I'm concerned about. And why this is so important for you to know is because that is what you're going to gravitate towards in writing, no matter what concept is given to you. Back in 2013, I was working on a story which had, which was between, again, brother and I didn't know that it was, that love is my obsession, but it was the relationship between a brother and sister. And there was uh, a, a murder, and there was some kind of a gray area about whether this is suicide or a murder kind of a thing. And a friend of mine kept telling me that this was excellent for a murder mystery. And uh, and no matter how hard I tried, I could not make it a murder mystery, because what I gravitated towards constantly was the love between the brother and sister, or the relationship between the brother and sister. And again, it has taken me a long time to realize that I could still make it a murder mystery, and the murder mystery can still be about the love between the brother and sister. But what would be impossible for me is to write a murder mystery where the love has no role to play. And so, for that matter, I think we as writers really need to know ourselves to the very core, and we can only write, our stories will only be as deep and as true as ourselves. The deeper we are able to look into ourselves, and just asking ourselves simple questions, what bothers me more? Is it the climate crisis? Is it AI? Is it that films are being shot digitally now and not on film? Is it that there is this, uh, mass exodus of people out of Syria? Or is it like, there are so many things that we could worry about. But what I worry about tells me something about who I am. And then what do I do about it? How do I think about it? What is my understanding of the core of this problem? And how do I then get it out to the world? That becomes your voice. So, you cannot be a person who, like a goody two shoes person, and then say that I want to write something irreverent. You're going to have it in you. Similarly, like, I've always been irreverent. And so you tell me to write a story about a really simple girl, I'm going to have to find what makes makes her angry, what makes her rebel. And that is where I'll find my story. Right? And so my story is going to be very, very deeply, deeply connected to who I am. And some of these memory exercises are also, I feel, very, very interesting. Now, there is a plethora of them on the internet, obviously, but Julia Cameron's The Artist Way is a wonderful place to start, to sort of know yourself as a person, as a writer, as an artist, and sort of experiment with that to find your voice. And then the next stage, of course, is to know the market. And this is where we really come to that huge chasm between why I want to tell stories and why people watch the stuff. And so this, I think, is the most controversial slide. If I showed this in FTII, they'd boo me out because, what about artistic integrity? What about? And when I say know the market, I am not saying surrender to the market. I am saying know it really well. None of the good stuff, like, for example, take something like Breaking Bad. Nobody was sitting at home thinking, what we haven't had. We've really never seen a story about a high school teacher who becomes a meth dealer. I really want to hear that story. Nobody was sitting at home thinking that, right? It was clearly Vince Vaughn who was like, this is the story I want to tell. But Vaughn clearly knows his market as well. This is the story I want to tell. And when you look at Breaking Bad, it's also the story of a very righteous, ethically sort of solid person who has lost a lot of things, right? And who has been okay with all of that until his life is over. And it's a complete flipping of that person. It's a complete spiraling down of that person into somebody who he wasn't, right? And why do we care about Walter White? We care for him because he was not meant to be this method healer, right? We care about him because life has dealt him a really raw deal. He's dying, and he doesn't even want to earn money for himself. He wants to do that for his wife and son, or that's how the story begins. But then by the end, you realize, and it's almost like the story, I don't know, at least we've heard this so many times, the story of Valmiki, of how he became Valmiki, right? Valmiki Rishi, that he was actually like a Morador, right? And he was looting people on the road. And then one day, Narad Muni asks him that, aren't you afraid that you're going to go to hell? You're committing all these crimes. And he says that I'm committing them for my wife and my children, right? Surely they will have a part to play. They'll take some part of my sins. And the family says no, right? And in such an interesting way, you see resonances of that Valmiki in Walter White, that when push comes to shove, nobody wants a part to play in that, right? But I think Walter's story goes even a shade darker, because Walter realizes that ultimately, although I was doing this for my wife and kids, I was doing this for myself. And so Vince Vaughn is telling the story, the exact story that he wanted to tell, right? But what he knew about the market was that it was, in a way, a very pertinent story for the American youth, because the drug epidemic has been a huge concern for American parents, right? And so he knew that there are places where I am going to be able to connect. Secondly, he knew the format really well. When we say know the market, I'm saying know the formats, right? What is a 40-minute or a 50-minute, 10-episode per season story? What is a 25-minute and 6-episode story? A Fleabag is very, very different from Breaking Bad, right? And yet, both are, you cannot say that they are bowing down to the market, but they know where their stories connect with the market, right? So knowing, when you have an idea, really asking yourself that how much of a story do I need? Is this the story of a theatrical film? Or is it for an OTT film? Now we have that distinction. Or is it a web series? If a web series, what format of web series, right? What kind of platforms are making this kind of content? When they make this content, what is it that they're looking for? Each platform, in a way, has its own, if you say, a certain footprint, you can say, that is very unique to itself. And that takes a little bit of studying. That, and a lot of good stories we know take a lot of time to tell, like something like Queen's Gambit, right? It was a screenplay, and it didn't really see the light of the day until it became a limited edition series. And so trends is something really, I think, where and this is where it's not like this slide, I feel, is not a very informative slide for me, or I'm not, giving you a lot of information about platforms. This is not a place where I tell you, no, this is what Sony wants, this is what Jio wants. So if you have this idea, go here. What I'm telling you is that do that study. That study is very, very important. And the reason I'm not telling you all of this, because these things shift. They keep changing all the time. Just a year ago, everybody was looking for female-led stories. And now, after Jigra has kind of not done as well as they hoped, nobody is really wanting to make a female lead story for a theatrical release. And so just like seasons, um, the the air in the industry keeps shifting, and it's so important for us as artists to sort of know that who is telling the kind of stories that I want to tell. Is this HBO? Is this BBC? Right? So for us, it will be a very important question that should I, that if your protagonist is a failed engineer who has just decided to, let's say, start a farm, and the treatment you want to talk about, the kind of adventures he's going to have on his farm in a funny way, that's probably a good pitch for a TVA, but may not be, let's say, for Netflix, right? And so this study of market, when we know it, we are less afraid of market. When we do not know the market, when we don't study the market, we are afraid that nobody wants to hear our stories. Or we are afraid that, oh, I'm really going to have to sell out, which, to be honest, to a certain extent, all of us will have to. There is really, there's a huge difference between writing in my diary, writing in my journal, and writing for, a for sale kind of a thing, because the market wants what it wants. And sometimes you change and sometimes you don't. But when we know what really is the core of our stories, it is easier for us to even know whether it's worth trying or not, right? So a couple of years ago, I worked on a platform was looking for something historical. Me and my co-writer, we wrote this magnum opus kind of a thing that takes place in the 1800s, so like 19th century, before freedom. And we had a lot of white characters. And the platform loved our pitch, but it simply wasn't sellable because it had too many white characters. And, you can't have all your main characters be white, and then sell it in India. And it was such a big lesson for us that, because 6 months of hard work, simply because we did not know that for this market, we're going to need an Indian protagonist. You can have a white side character, right? So Lagan works, but you can't have a white Bhuvan in your story, because that's not the market you're pitching to. And so some of these lessons we are going to learn simply by, writing more, pitching more, learning more. But a lot of it, I think, can be also learned by watching more and really analyzing. And I think the same goes for verticals, like the micro dramas that are coming up. Nobody really knows. We're going to have to sit and observe, that what is actually selling and why. And then we would know that, oh, okay, so this is what people are, really preferring to watch in the 2 or 3 minute platform. So some of that study we have to do. And I think that as storytellers, I feel that it's, like I realized about my first screenplay, that everybody who I narrate this to say that it's a wonderful story, but who's going to watch it, say something about, the kind of niche audience that this story may have. And which is why now I'm thinking that novel is a better genre for something like this, because we know that readers are slightly more serious consumers of content. They're not necessarily looking at a twist every 5 minutes. But we know that when you're writing a web series, at least every end of the episode, we're going to need a twist. And so some of this study helps us sort through our own material and figure out where is the potential, right, for telling my stories in current market. And then we come to the actual doing of it, which is the writing. And this is where I think craft comes into picture. A craft is a way of luring people, into listening to your story when they think they are watching exactly what they want to watch. And there are two films that really, really have driven this home for me. One is Brokeback Mountain. It was 2005 uh, when Brokeback released, and we all know now it's a gay cowboy love story. And uh, you know, if you look at the American politics at that time, um, gay marriages were not legal anywhere in the US. And in fact, the very following year, the one place, California, where they were sort of legal, it was reversed. And so nobody really was sitting at home and saying that, hey, we haven't seen a good gay love story. And yet, Brokeback Mountain is the fifth highest grossing love story of all time in America. It has surpassed so many chick flicks. So many of the love stories we feel, or we conclude or assume that people want to watch. Why? Because before we see these people fall in love, we see them as human beings. The film doesn't come out with a certain agenda of, hey, I'm telling you a gay love story. Those people are as far away from being gay as any two men could be, right? What the film does is that I know you like to watch stories of human interest. I know that there is a vast number of people in America or in the world all over actually who connect with being poor, who connect with having to do these really, really difficult, jobs, which is a drudgery, which they cannot escape. And I know that there are people who will have empathy for these two people for whom life is so difficult. And very interestingly, this year a Marathi film called Sabarmonda has released. And in many, many ways, it does the same thing as Brokeback Mountain, is that it takes these two it tells the story of a farmer in a very small village, a farmer who doesn't even own a land. That's one of the characters. And the other characters is the city dwelling boy who's just lost his father, but he hails from that village. And so he comes to the village for his father's last rites, and how these two boys bond. And before we see them falling in love, we see the sheer difficulty of their existence, right? We see their humanity and we see how hard it is for these people to live their lives. And then when they find each other, there is this flame of hope that rises within us, that, oh my God, there is some relief, right? And so this is what craft makes people do. It makes you root for the characters. It makes you want for the character what the character wants. And when we don't have craft, we're essentially, when we say that, oh, it's a gay love story, then I know that there is only 20% people who actually want to carry that gay flag and want to come and watch my story, right? And so the craft, and, I've repeatedly said that what we connect to is people's suffering, people's loss. And that forms the very, very basis of Aristotle's Poetics, which is, I think, the fundamental of writing craft. And there is, of course, it's not, it's a text that was written 3,000 years ago. And it's not even a complete text as such. And very interestingly, when we, but that is the very first book that was written on the craft of writing. And it was written by Aristotle, who was also, he was a biologist and a philosopher. He was not a writer at all. What he did was, another thing he did was, he was studying insects, and he was looking at what are the similarities within the bodies of these insects that allow them to fly. And he realized that, oh, all of them seem to have wings. All of them seem to have very light torsos. So this guy was very good at recognizing patterns. And so when he was looking at plays and he was thinking, what is it that makes some plays popular and the other plays not, right? And the market will tell you that, oh, a film with a macho hero works. A film like, when we are not thinking of craft, we reduce it to content. We say that this does not work, right? But when we go to the core of the craft, what Aristotle discovered was that there is a structure that these plays follow. And he called them pity, fear, and catharsis, right? That's the structure he gave us. And pity now has a very different connotation in our language. Like, we don't really think pity is a good thing. We don't want anybody to pity us. So let's replace that with empathy, right? So he says that first, these stories get you to empathize with the character, no matter who this character is. You like them. You're concerned and like them, not in the, and again, likability, you don't have to be a good person to like them, but there is something about you that the character that the people just connect with, and people start rooting for the character. So the job of the first few minutes or the first portion, the beginning, middle, and end, as he calls the beginning, the purpose of the beginning is to create empathy for the character. The purpose of the middle is to now throw this character into so much turmoil that now the audience who is invested in this character is fearing for them. That, oh my God, what's going to happen to them? Right? And the end is catharsis, where it's not just the catharsis of all the emotions that we've been holding within us for the entire second act or the entire middle. Of course, those feelings are released, but we also take something with us. This release of emotions gives us something. These are not just emotions for that character, but also for myself. For example, Gone with the Wind gave me the strength to be the person that I am. And it was very interesting to me that Melanie, who is like this really good girl in every single way, was a side character. It gave me so much strength to say that I can be this person who I am, right? So of course, and the book and breaks your heart in the end. It is not like, I remember after I finished the book, I was like so lost for like 8 days. I couldn't eat, I couldn't drink. I was like, why? She's just 28. Don't do this to her, right? It broke my heart, but it taught me so much about love. It taught me so much about, claiming my place in the world. So much about not being afraid to be the only woman in a business that is led by men. And until 50 years ago, that was true of all trades, because all trades were trades for men, and we sort of were newcomers. But for all of you, so the catharsis was not just resolution of the story. It is not about how this is how the love story of Red and Scarlet ends. No. It leaves you with something. There is a residue inside you, and it keeps growing, right? And so this is the very heart of the craft. And any story, no matter what story you take a thriller, you take a romance, you take a comedy, any story can follow this kind of a structure. And I purposefully refuse to call it beginning, middle, end. Like, I think it was Godard that said that, films have to have beginning, middle, and end, but not necessarily in that order. Because what is more important is the beginning of my film to create empathy, and that might be the ending of my story. So what is more important is how I tell the story, and that will dictate your structure. That will dictate everything else, right? Knowing who my characters are, knowing where they start and where they end, and then how do I get to like my character, get people to like these characters, to root for them. What is the essential thing that I have to do? Just a sec. Yeah, sorry. I have these alarms that go off in the evening, and I thought I'd switched it off, but I hadn't. Anyway, so that is really the core of the craft, you know. And I think what our craft allows us to have, have protagonists that are right from Raman Raghav. You take Anurag Kashyap films, you don't have very likable characters, and yet we root for them, right? And so the structure, literally a good understanding of craft allows us to tell whichever story we want to tell. So this essentially for me is the crux of finding your voice. First, knowing what stories matter to you. And so knowing that other kinds of stories, like for example, I don't really like horror, fear is, I'm not big on fear. And so no matter how much somebody pays me, I am not going to be able to write a good horror. And this happens very often among us writers, that somebody brings something to me and I say, hey, I'm really glad and honored that you think I should write this, but I'm not the right person. Can I connect you with this person? Because I think they will do justice to this, right? So knowing what I'm good at and what I'm not good at. And, no amount of craft, I feel, can really replace that individuality. Just because I know the craft doesn't, because my heart is never going to be there in that. I'm always going to gravitate towards my core. So knowing myself, secondly, knowing who is doing what. So really understanding the market well, keeping ourselves updated with the various channels that we have, various ways of distribution, what kind of things are being watched on YouTube, whatever it is. And then you, the third part is, how do I now fuse these two things using my craft, right? Can this love story also be a genre piece? But I know that it's a love story at the core. And I think when we do that, we don't really have to surrender to or, bend for the market. But this takes tremendous amount of rewriting. Especially if you're working as a writer and not as a writer-director, the amount of feedback you're going to get and the amount of rewriting you'll have to do, it's enormous. And so learning to be detached from everything that you've written, like the first thing when I was so happy with the first 4 lines of this novel that I found yesterday. I was like, oh, this is so good. And when my mom said that, oh, this is exactly how Kamu's birthday, I was like, I got to change this. Right? And this is why we writers say that we have to kill our favorite babies. But I have to now be very committed to rewriting it again and again until I can maintain its essence. I can say exactly what I'm trying to say, and yet nobody's going to go, oh, I have read this somewhere. Now, this is one reason why I would rewrite, but there are many reasons we rewrite. The most important reason is that first drafts are for you, because in the first draft, you're figuring out your story in the head. It is not for other people, right? And it is in this. So first draft, I think first draft is the draft of translation. You are translating your thoughts into language. That's all there is to it. All the crafting begins from second draft onwards, right? And so you will overwrite in your first drafts a lot because you are reminding yourself this is like this, right? So you'll have minute descriptions of the house, of how somebody dresses, what they eat, what they don't eat, or whatever. And then by second draft, you're like, but not necessary. Now your characters are going to start embodying those details. You don't have to write it down anywhere because your characters are going to start behaving, right? And so 3 to 4 drafts are really normal. And so as a professional writer, that's something we have to be very willing to do, constantly rewrite. And I think, and the last part I feel is to learn how to take feedback. I recently, I'm working on something, and one of the feedbacks, the director had a very specific vision of how he wanted the scene to be. And what I wrote was not according to the vision. And very instinctively, he said, this is garbage. And I was like, I have spent 3 nights writing this scene. I have barely slept, right? And it was so heartbreaking. And then, of course, he also gained his composure and said, you know what I mean is that I want it this way. And yes. And then I also had to take a deep breath and say that, oh, okay, this is how you want it. And it's my job to give it to you like that. But to really be able to, understand the feedback, learn from the feedback, so that it's not like, oh my God, I have to throw away everything. And of course, sometimes you have to, like, I had to take 2 days. I just had to sleep for 2 days after that feedback. I couldn't do anything. I was like, then on the third day, I will come back to the drawing board. But so we'll have to figure out our own ways of dealing with feedback, but know that there is going to be feedback. And sometimes your closest friends are also not going to like what you write. You're really putting yourself out there. You're going to go out there and people will not know that you're the creator of this, and somebody will talk shit about your show and you'll be like, well, I did my best. So a lot of the craft also has to do with, um, it stays throughout the writing, the rewriting, the making, and even afterwards. I think, although this is the hardest part of, I think, being an artist, is that, especially a professional artist, is that you are really putting a part of your soul out there. And then you have to really learn to be detached so that you don't break down, so that you can, stand up again. And that is what then gives you the confidence to put yourself out there again. Right? That's how you build the confidence, knowing that I'm tougher than the system, knowing that I have learned the system, I'm smarter than the system, and I know what I want to do. So, I think that's really the crux of all of this, that beating the system at its game in a certain sense by knowing yourself, knowing the system, and really, really honing your craft. So that's about it. If you have any questions, we'll take them now. Shubhra or Shikha, how much time do we have for questions? You'll do the moderation of questions, right? Yeah, okay.
I would just like to add that we're also launching a short poll simultaneously with the questions. So please do take it.
All right, so I see. I hope nobody minds being called by first name. I don't mind being called by first name at all. I've been ma'am too much. So feel free to call me Ketki. So Akshay has raised his hand. Akshay, could you ask your question?
Ketki, if you don't mind, I have like a set of 4 questions. So
Okay.
I hope it won't take much of your time.
Let's start with one question, and then if somebody else has other, we'll circle back to you. We'll take another
Okay.
question and we'll circle back to you. But
In
let's
that
start.
case, okay.
Yeah.
So the first question that I have is that since you stated that films should be engaging and it should have a compelling narrative, there are times that you know wait a second. Yeah. So there are times that, okay, there are people who have come out of ad films and then made their mark as a film director, like say Rajkumar Hirani. Rajkumar Hirani had come from ad films as both a video editor, I mean, a movie ad editor, and then a director as well.
Yeah.
Then he graduated into a movie director, and I mean a film editor and then a film director. And there he still used his formula of engaging the audience after every minute, after every 30 seconds, just like
Okay.
an ad. So his whatever scenes you take from, say, his films like Munna Bhai MBBS, Three Idiots, Lage Raho Munna Bhai, and other such films, they all have a particular pattern that every 30 seconds, every minute, there's some kind of emotional twist or some kind of an emotional breakdown for a character that will lead to the audience feeling engaged as well as empathizing for the protagonist.
Yes, but what's your question?
Yeah, yes, ma'am. The question is, will this device work every time, or is it like just a flash in the pan?
Rajkumar Hirani has definitely replicated his success time and
Mm-hmm.
again. And there is also, if you see, it's very interesting, whether or not you like his films, that's a whole different discussion. But at the very core, he's talking about serious issues, the issues that people may or may not be interested in. And he's using what he learned as an ad filmmaker to lure people into listening to those stories, right? Whereas somebody like, let's say, Anurag Kashyap has a very different voice, and also has made consistently good work. And there are so many, like there is Vishal Bharadwaj, who has a very, very different voice, right? So there are a number of filmmakers, each one of them having very unique voice. And so it is not really about whether a technique lasts or not. I think the question really is that technique who you are? Is that technique true to who you are as a person? Because if I try to replicate the technique that Rajkumar Hirani uses, I may not succeed because that is not who I am. Right? And which is where I feel that when we observe others, what we should pick up is not the technique itself, but more of the meta, analysis of it, that, oh, this person has a technique and this stems from who he is. And then go back and ask yourself that question, that who am I? What have I learned? What is my way of engaging people? Right? And there are certain subjects where, like Rajkumar Hirani doesn't start, let's say, with a cliffhanger. He starts with a daily life. And so the life has to be interesting. And so something constantly has to happen to keep people interested. Whereas somebody else will show you a really gory image in the cold open. We've seen that technique being used in web series a lot, right? And then we return to seemingly mundane life. But because we have seen something before, now we don't need a twist every 30 seconds. We have patience because something else has caught our attention, right? So to each their own, to be honest. Also, who is your audience? That becomes another very, very important question. Like there are filmmakers, like the Sabar Bunda I was talking about. It doesn't have any of these sort of techniques. It just says that please come and watch. And its entire technique is in its honesty, that I'm not going to bring any craft to this. I'm not even going to try and beautify this. Right? And sometimes just breaking people's expectations makes you wonder, oh, wow. But then that may not be a film for everybody. Right? So finding your own technique is, I think, what is more important than like learning all of these techniques. It tells you that essentially also now even your own viewing patterns can tell you a lot. Like how long do you stay on a particular show or on a particular film before you decide, let me watch something else. So that especially with OTT, our attention spans are very, very low. When we were going to theaters, you wouldn't get out of the theater in first 3 minutes. If it was a really bad film, then you would probably leave in the interval, but which meant that there was a certain, allowance for the film to start really slow. And which is why knowing your medium matters so much, because what works for a theatrical film will not work for an OTT film. What works for an OTT film may not work for a reel. Right? There are cringe reels that, like, look at an ASMR reel. Nothing happens. There is no twist. You are simply watching somebody do their nails and listen, right? So every medium is going to have its own unique requirements. And there you have to figure out what technique works the best. Yeah. Next question. So if anybody else has a question, we will go on to that. Otherwise, we'll take the next question by Akshay.
Yeah. Anybody has a question in the audience?
Sonu has asked something about Meeta Ki Kahani, but I don't know what is it that he wants to ask. And I have not watched Meeta Ki Kahani. But if Sonu, if you care to elaborate on the question, then
Yeah.
yeah, Sampath has a question, right?
I will just unmute him.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hi, Ketki.
Yeah. Hi.
This is Sampath. So, yeah, I'm a writer and an independent filmmaker. So, my doubt is, so when you write a scene for a director and, you put a lot of, that emotional quotient into it, but the outlets say that they don't like it. So, in that case, how do you face the rejection? And also, how do we get to understand the director's sensibilities so that we can write a scene that would work for them?
Yeah. It's a very important question. I think the first part I briefly spoke about, that one
Yes,
has
yes.
to,
Yep.
like I said, I just went through it. And
Got it.
so
Yeah.
one has to realize that, okay, my vision is different. And one has to realize that different doesn't necessarily mean bad.
Okay.
This scene may fit in some other film,
Okay, got
or
it.
this tone, this approach may fit somewhere else.
Got it.
So
Got it.
I think what we need to do, what works in terms of getting detached, is to sort of let go of these simple adjectives of good, bad,
Got it.
or boring, interesting.
Got it.
Actually go deeper into why is it working or not working. And so I ended up having a long conversation with the director in terms of what is it that they wanted. And
Okay,
it's a
got it.
tricky thing, because sometimes the director may not know themselves.
Yep.
A lot of people
Most of
only
the
know what they
times.
don't want when they read it.
Yeah. 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 Most of the times.
And so it's going to be a trial and error.
Yes.
And at that point, if you're a good writer, you will be able to at least present a few options. That,
Got
okay,
it.
this is the approach that I have taken. Like, one of the things that I had done recently in my script is that I had taken this approach that my protagonist doesn't speak much.
Okay.
My understanding was that, but then if your protagonist doesn't speak much, who's going to deliver the punchlines? So
Okay.
it's a
Yeah.
problem, right?
Yes, true.
But I needed to understand that the problem is in my understanding of the character. I thought
Okay, okay.
it would be interesting to watch a person who doesn't speak much, but when they speak, it makes sense. And we do have
Superb.
a lot of people around like that, right? And
Superb.
for me,
Yep.
those people are interesting. But clearly,
True.
that's not what
True.
this film requires. So
Yes, yes.
the scene doesn't work not because I'm not a good writer, or it's because
Got you.
I had made a choice, and that choice doesn't work for this particular story, for this particular
Got
director,
it. Got it.
right?
Got it.
And so then I have to go back and, what kind of a dialogue do you want?
Yes.
Right? What if she
Yeah.
says this? Would that work for you? What if
Yeah,
she
okay,
says
okay.
that? Would that work for you?
Got
Right?
it.
And so through that conversation, I think we develop a deeper
Got it.
understanding of what the director wants.
Got
And
it.
sometimes we will not agree, and we will just have to agree to disagree. But this being the director's medium, you will have to let go.
Got it.
Say that, yeah, I actually think my scene works better, but this is what you want.
Yeah, yeah.
And sometimes you just say it in your heart because you cannot say it out loud.
Yes, yes.
So,
Absolutely.
luckily for
Yeah.
me, we had a very good conversation. So now I'm well situated in what to rewrite. But
Got
that
it.
is going to differ director to director, project to project.
Got it. Got it. Also, Ketki, I have one quick question. Can I ask?
Let's see if anybody else has a question, and we'll come back
Yes,
to you.
please. Yes, please.
Right?
Yes.
Anyone else has a question? Otherwise, we'll take one of Akshay's questions and then come back to you, Sampath. Yeah. So yeah, let's go. Okay. Okay. Whoever has a question, raise your hands so that I think Linu George has a question. And then Pranav has a question. So let's go with Linu George and then Pranav.
Hi, ma'am. So while you have told one approach to story writing, mine is all one, the need for creativity, and the second, the what if funda.
Right.
So it would have a little of me as a character or as a protagonist, but still it is somewhere beyond me. I don't write much about myself, but the what if aspect. But now the problem is one is every scene needs to have one transition, and I am unable to imagine two different characters talking to each other. If I have to put a case here, like I'm angry. I'm unable to gauge the inputs from the two characters who interact with each other. And that's the problem statement.
I'm sorry, I don't understand your question too well. Can you rephrase it?
Okay. Now if I put let's say I put a hate message in this forum.
Okay.
I'm unable to gauge what all are the reactions and anti-reactions which can happen. First problem. Second, this
You're
helps
saying the
me to
audience's reactions.
Yes, this
Okay.
helps me to understand the different transitions a character can take.
Okay, I think you're talking about three different things here. Okay. Now, the first of all, when I say you need to know your voice, even the what if that concerns you is about your voice. Knowing your voice doesn't mean writing about your life. But for example, there are certain Rajat Kapoor makes a lot of what if films, like Aankho Dekhi. What if I just, right? But he's that kind of, but that is what concerns him, right? Or mixed doubles, that what if, right? That is something that is his voice, that defines his voice. And the way he tells the stories defines his voice. It doesn't mean that you write autobiographically. I don't write about my life at all. Most of us don't want to write about our personal things. We morph those personal things into something, fictitious. But why does it bother me? Why am I more interested in this what if and not that what if? Right? Like, for example, what if aliens landed on Earth tomorrow? That's a what if. But why does Rajat Kapoor not care about that what if? Why is he talking about if I believe, right? So that itself is your voice. So I don't think there is a dichotomy there. Secondly, when you're writing, I don't know how you're worrying, so much about what the reaction of the audience is going to be. The worry itself, so when you're putting what you want to say above the craft, that is when the fear comes up. When you know that I have prepared my audience to come here, you will not have the fear, right? That is how bold content gets made. There is part irreverence, but a big part of it is your craft. You know that you're going to lead the audience to that place, which means that the audience will have to be ready to receive that question. And beyond that, it's always possible that people don't like what you do. I was told by a very close friend recently that she didn't like one of my very recent writings. And I was like, okay, what can you do about it? There are going to be people who don't like it. And it's also like that, that you may be Sachin Tendulkar, but someday you're out on zero. You cannot make a single run. So sometimes every day you cannot go down there and hit a century. You're going to have good days, you're going to have bad days, right? I think there is actually a very, very good little clip of Rafael Nadal talking about it. That, even the best of tennis players are going to have like maybe 50% of hit rate. So there's no such thing as perfection. So if we let the fear get the better of us, then we are never going to be able to write. What is more important is to invest in, to inquire what are the reasons why somebody may not like it. Right? And how do I bring them to care about my story or this character so that when I say this, they're ready to receive it. Does that answer your question? Okay. So we have one more question from Pranav.
Hello. Hi, Kitki.
Yeah, hi.
So, I have a question. Since you are talking about how do I get my story? So, let's say there are few directors who don't watch much films. They don't have any favorite films or such that. Like,
Yeah.
how do I find this is my forte? I'm good in this kind of storytelling. I mean, I'm not sure about how can I find myself, like if I'm not in the zone of not watching much films. Let's
Okay,
say.
so see, as an audience, of course, I'm also kind of old school, so I read a lot more than I watch. I find that a lot more engaging and enriching.
Yeah.
But I feel that as a filmmaker, I don't think we really have a choice right now to not watch a lot of things. Because what that is going to do is it's going to put you at the risk of doing something that has already been done to death. And you will do it just because you don't know it's been done to death. A lot of the techniques, you will feel that, oh, I'm doing something great. And the people are like, but we've seen this 10 times already.
Yeah.
And so not being informed is not really a choice. That's not really, that's not going to work in your advantage at all. I am not saying that you have to watch everything, but you have to have some knowledge or understanding of the current storytelling scenario. That I don't think has anything to do with your voice. Your voice essentially has to do with what you care about. And like I said, Julia Cameron's book is a great way to sort of find yourself as an artist, I feel.
Yeah.
But just ask yourself this question that, if you had 1,000 rupees and there are 4 charities that you have to choose from. Okay, there is an animal shelter, there is rural education, there is save the trees, and let's say there is one particular sick child whose life has to be saved. How do you make that choice?
Yeah, by moral, like what I value and everything, right?
Right. That is who you are. That is what you care more about. So essentially, what are you obsessed with? What do you think about most of the times? Right? That is who you are. What makes you really angry when you go out in the world? Sometimes I'm okay to see the litter, like, somebody, like, who will I get angry with more? If somebody threw litter on the street, as opposed to somebody spitting on the street, as opposed to somebody beating somebody else on the street, as opposed to somebody showing road rage, right? It tells me who I am and what I value. And that is what we need to know ourselves, because we know that that is where our stories are going to go.
So just to add a follow-up, like let's say a gangster film, right? So if I'm about to take a gangster film and I'm going to show the protagonist as someone who is like which is not politically correct, but I'm going to show him as a hero. Is it proper? I mean, is it politically correct in this
I'm
current
not going to
generation?
get into there's nothing politically correct about good stories at all. You've seen Mirzapur,
Yeah.
we've seen stories where our heroes, we don't really care about that. So
Yeah.
I think it's not about morals or ethics anymore. I think, in fact, there was a time when the good versus evil line was very, very clear. And in some ways, it might also be coming back, but I feel in a very convoluted way, not not very clear. Like, we don't have uh, like, we never saw, let's say, when we talk about Ramayana as a story also, we never really see Ram being even mischievous. He's just always the good boy. But when we go to Krishna, he's mischievous. Right? So there is a spectrum. And from there we go to, so if when you're looking at a film like Bahubali, it, very clearly follows this good versus evil thing. That a good person is a good person, an evil person is an evil person. And the good person does everything right, and the evil person is not doing anything right. Yeah. But when you watch a film, let's say like Annabelle, there's a very different philosophy with which it goes, right? There is, or even something like, let's say, Makbul. Yeah. So the philosophy of the film is very different. So I don't think whatever is correct for you, politically correct is a very different rabbit hole to go down.
Sure.
It's almost 8, so Shikha,
Yes,
Subrat.
and we have already overrun it was really engaging, and I think everyone is lost while you are speaking. It is really was very helpful for us. So thank you, ma'am. And I think, but I just wanted to inform everyone that we are launching our mentorship feature where you can reach out to ma'am directly one-on-one And so, like, you guys have more questions. So, ma'am's profile is there. Do reach out to her for mentorship, and we will coordinate that. And I know there is a lot of questions guys wants to ask. So, I think going forward, you can directly reach out to us, and then we can coordinate this session further with them. Okay. And thank you so much. I think Shubhra wants we will have a last ending thing. Shubhra, can you? Yes.
Okay, so if
Thank
we
you
are
so
wrapping
much.
up, I just want to take
Yes.
this moment to thank everybody for coming to this session. And I hope you enjoyed it and it was fun for me. So, and I'm really looking forward to connecting with all of you on Freecomers. Thank you. Over to you, Shubhra.
Thank you
And
so
thanks
much,
for
Ketki
asking
ma'am.
questions and engaging. I think this was great for me as well.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Ketki ma'am, and thank you everybody else for joining us today for our very first Filmy Friday session. We will be sharing a feedback form shortly. Have a wonderful evening, and we do look forward to seeing you on our next session, which will be held on December 5th. It will be led by filmmaker and FTIA alumnus Vijay Dondu Kalamkar sir, who will share his insights from his own journey, which will help you get a clear idea of how films really come to life. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.